Magnetic state, reflection in others. So I have the complete reader of William Walker Atkinson, and today I went through some information in relation with magnetic state operating from the premise of certainty in reference to The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles, in which we discussed it recently, going about doing things in the way of certainty. I'll put a link in the description to that video. And so now in regards to personal magnetism, let us further emphasize that different states of mind that we identify with play out as others reflecting those different states of mind. Behavioral patterns, emotional patterns, thinking patterns within ourselves reveal. And also, as we relate with each other, we see that their behavioral patterns, emotional patterns relate also. And so he says, we associate certain things with certain feelings. And when we see these things, we are apt to experience the feeling indicated. People have been overcome by the sight of a picture or a scene in a play, a song, a poem, or suggestive music. Now, as we discussed in Tuesday's video, and I want to further emphasize this, within ourselves, we can select any state of mind. Although a person might not have realized that they were doing this all throughout their lives, when it comes to relating with each other. This is true for personal life, business life, all areas of our life. So I want to share with you a story. It's really more of an experiment. When I started to deeply work with this information, I developed the ability to switch myself into different states of mind instantaneously with deliberate, conscious suggestion. One state of mind would be one of congruence, harmony with others. And another state of mind is where I would feel limited. I'm essentially simulating what it was like to live prior to accessing this information that we discuss. One where I felt at the effect of the world. And that is simply by suggesting to myself that reality works a certain way. For example, one suggestion that I would give to myself, which would bring me into a state of mind of harmony, by speaking it to myself, saying it to myself, is all people show up in the spirit of harmony in a mutually collaborative way. And so for me, this statement, the fundamental element of what this implies is harmony. So as I would say this to myself, I would feel a certain way. I would observe my behaviors, my emotions, and how I would relate with others and how they would relate to me. It would be very harmonious. Conversations would feel effortless. Everything seemed to flow. This was true and authentic to what I refer to as the authentic self-image. So suggesting this to myself felt authentic. And so thus, the communications, the interactions, the relationships with each other in those experiences that followed from identifying with that state of mind, suggesting to myself, felt accordingly. Then I would try something. I would leave the room, and I would say something to myself as an experiment, such as, I don't know if these people will accept me. And then I would feel differently. Now, keep it in consideration, this was something that I was doing unconsciously before. Before I would enter into interactions, I would say, people don't accept me to myself. Subtly, I would imagine it. And I would enter into those interactions, and it would be experienced that way. And so now I'm doing this from the perspective of testing, really to see what happens. So upon suggesting that to myself, I actually accepted my own suggestion. Because remember, we're the only suggester. And then when I entered that interaction, I noticed that people appear differently in the experience. they seem to mimic that state of mind, which was one of they don't accept me. So when we look very carefully here, and he says, we associate certain things with certain feelings. And when we see these things, we are apt to experience the feeling indicated. People have been overcome by the sight of a picture or a scene in a play, a song, a poem, or suggestive music. Now, before coming across this information, interacting with people, or wherever I was, in the workplace, personal life, whatever area of my life, interacting with people, and they would say certain things in which I would react internally. I would automatically say I am too, some meaning that I identified with based on past experience, in which it was limiting, disempowering, which is not akin to the magnetic state or the way of certainty, the ideal state of mind, and as a result, allow myself from this programming that I was identifying with. I wasn't aware I was doing this. I would allow myself identify with, say I am too, bring myself into a different state of mind that was far from ideal, and then experience disharmony in my relating with that other person. And so now, after working with this information, and what I encourage is to practice higher awareness, observing to see what kind of state of mind that you're in. You'll know by how you feel. Feeling is the secret. And if you're in a state of mind that doesn't feel ideal, doesn't feel congruent to how you are and how you want to relate with others, you have the ability to select a different state. And the way we do this is through suggestion. We can suggest to ourselves, I am that person now. People relate to me in a harmonious way. As I enter this environment, people embrace me. I'll be able to see it, experience it in this environment when I enter it, that people accept me for who I am. And as we also discussed in Tuesday's video, this all spawns from the completion within, recognizing that all of this exists within us. We can select any state we want by suggesting to ourselves. And we get better at this with practice by allowing, really, our attention to be on our vision, number one. Number two, if thoughts show up as we are relating with others, as we are thinking about others, that are not resonant to how we see ourselves in our ideal relationships, let them pass without judgment. The formless self takes form through the identification, thought, feeling, identification within, and then the theater or the behaviors or the experiences play out accordingly. So we have the ability to observe. We even have the ability to select states of mind that we would consider to be ideal, not ideal, as I have experimented with. And so knowing this, we relate over to, we suggest to ourselves, we think or feel, or think feelingly, whatever implies, I use suggestion, such as the suggestions that I gave earlier, to bring myself into the state of mind that I would consider ideal and observe the interactions play out. And if during the interactions, any beliefs are brought to the surface, any emotional reactivity, convoluted behaviors, thinking patterns that are not true and accurate to how I see myself in my ideal are brought to the surface, as we have discussed. People are messengers revealing the state of mind that we're in. I note these patterns down and I ask myself the question, is this really true? And I engage in self-talk or autosuggestion to speak to myself. People relate to me in a harmonious way. Or one can imagine visually, or any five sensory in imagination, hearing, touch, etc. And they can also do this viscerally by doing what they really love to do. And then from this flow, this bliss, we allow the magic to occur to reflect your vision. We allow things happen automatically effortlessly, authentically, congruently. You'll notice this in your interactions with others. And then we'll see the correlation here of how that state, in which we call it the magnetic state, where harmonious relationships and interactions seem to show up, they were always there, is, as I titled this mind map, the magnetic state reflection in others. And so let's continue further into our conversation in relation with this book here from William Walker Atkinson called The Secret of Mental Magic, A Course of 7 Lessons. And so I took some notes. Let's reflect upon them. We see on all sides those who seem to exert a wonderful and a mysterious mental influence in others, and those associated with them or in the public mind. Leaders spring into prominence, apparently owning their power to some mysterious influence over the mind. When we meet certain people, we become at once impressed by something about them that makes its power and influence felt by us. So again, we are assigning the meaning. And what I've noticed all throughout my life, when I've met these authentic leaders, they seem to have one characteristic: the ability to inspire us. We would consider them to be inspirational. This would imply that there is something within them, and more accurately put, something within us recognizes something within them. And through this recognition, we go into the state of mind, and the recognition or suggestion is happening within ourselves, in which we feel inspired. Very important, we are playing the role of suggester and suggestee inside. This further encourages what we have been suggesting to ourselves at a deep level, that we really do desire to live how we truly want to live. And so what we do is we take the responsibility. We say, what's the state of mind that we want to represent? How do we truly want to live? And lightheartedly place ourselves, attention in the vision, on our ideal, in our mind's eye, and enter into that state. And since that's authentically how we see ourselves to be, this is the reason why I say, allow your attention to be on your vision. You're allowing yourself to be how you genuinely desire to be, and thus creating the experiences which we can refer to as the magnetic state, which is how others relate to you ideally. And so let's get deeper into this idea of suggesting, being the suggester and suggestee within in relation to Tuesday's video. He says right here, I wish to remind you that every written, printed, or spoken word or words is the outward and physical expression of some inner mental state of the person uttering or writing the words. The words are the outward and visible signs of an inward feeling. Remember this always. Mere words in themselves have no suggestive value. The value depends upon the meaning impressed upon them by the mind of the person using them, accompanied by an understanding of their meaning by the person hearing or reading them. So we speak to ourselves in a way that we understand ourselves, in which we relate to ourselves, the conscious and subconscious inward relationship, and through speaking to ourselves in a way that we communicate to ourselves ideally in relation to how we see ourselves in our ideal, we bring ourselves into that state of mind. And on the flip side, written, spoken word, as we go back here, people have been overcome by the sight of a picture or a scene in a play, a song, a poem, or suggestive music. Always remember this. Communication in any shape or form, we're the ones assigning meaning to it. And this is very powerful because when we're interacting with each other and someone is saying certain things, what is the meaning that we're applying to what they're saying? We are the ones suggesting to ourselves in relation to the word or words that are being communicated. As he says, right here, I wish to remind you that every written, printed, or spoken word or words is the outward and physical expression of some inner mental state of the person uttering or writing the words. And so we take the responsibility. What are we uttering or writing to ourselves, knowingly or unknowingly, upon the subconscious mind as we are experiencing words, statements, conversations? And are we allowing, this is the most important thing, and are we allowing thoughts and ideas that do not resonate to be identified with, as we have the power to allow the formless self, I, to identify with any suggestion, or as I say all throughout the videos, what do we say I am to? And going back to the example that I gave earlier, as I had identified with these different statements, I brought myself into different states of mind, which had totally different experiences with the same people. And so he says, I shall not attempt to offer evidence to prove the existence of the fact of the transference of mentative energy at this time and place. The evidence may be had elsewhere if needed, but I believe that everyone who reads these lessons will have had some personal experience that will render further proof unnecessary. And so this is a very important distinction. In the earlier stages of my life, I would look around to see what others were doing, what they were saying, and I was allowing myself within to suggest to myself certain meaning that would form a self-image in which I felt disharmony when it comes to relating with other people. I actually remember in 2001, there were these websites in which they were communicating about states of mind in relation to neuro-linguistic programming. And I would download these texts and I would print them out, and I had a hard time understanding what they were talking about. And that's why reference experience is such a great teacher. When we look back at our lives and we say, when were we the most magnetic? What were we thinking? What were we feeling? What were we doing? How did we maintain it? What was our experience in relation to it? And so the commonalities that I found is that the attention was on the vision, my ideal, and seeing myself as that person now. And I was able to remain in that ideal state of mind by allowing the thoughts that did not resonate, that appeared in my mind for whatever reason, to pass without judgment, without fighting them, without creating enemies inside myself in relation to those thoughts. And what I noticed is the words, the conversations, the communication, the body language would flow automatically with myself and others that I was relating with. They would also communicate that everything felt natural during the interactions with me. There was a feeling of naturalness, and that's what I mean when I say allow the magic to occur to reflect your vision. It's wu-wei in Taoism, it's effortless, it's bliss, it's flow-based, as I say, bliss. Everything happens automatically as a reflection of that ideal state of mind, which is another reason why I make that the priority. And I recommend journaling and writing down when you have these experiences that are ideal. And ask yourself, what were you thinking? What were you feeling? What were you doing? What were you imagining prior to those ideal experiences in which you noticed that people were showing up saying the same thing that you were imagining? Conversations were synchronistic. The interactions seemed to flow effortlessly. Interactions felt like a dance. Conversations feel like a dance. And the interactions flow in a mutual win-win relationship, mutual benefit. And so let's look at this note here. He says, at this point, I wish only to call attention to the fact that there is something, some kind of force that is generated and then passed from one mind to another, conveying mental states, feelings, emotions, thoughts with it. However, we recognize its existence and its effects, again from our own reference experience, and see that it is a real something, which is another reason why I'm encouraging this conversation. The more I encourage thinking this way, believing reality to work this way, the easier it is for me to recognize what thoughts I'm identifying with, thus keeping into consideration the 7-day mental diet, allowing myself to think truth and accuracy in relation to the vision, and thus experiencing the harmony in relation with others. And so he says something really interesting. He says, we recognize its existence and effects and see that it is a real something. We might not understand its ultimate nature. It's just what is. I like that. Just what is. It is. He says you may call it whatever you'd like, but I propose calling it mentative energy. And the stream of current of this energy I shall call mentative currents. And so the way I relate this mentative currents is a consistent internal conversation from the premise of how you ideally see yourself to be. This also includes what we are suggesting to ourselves in relation to the verbal and nonverbal communication as we relate with others, and what I find to be effective to maintain the state of mind that is ideal and continue to play out those ideal interactions and relations with others. As I continue to experience this myself, is to discover true and accurate meaning within intuitively in relation to the vision. So for example, in sales, the other person appears to not want to do the deal with them. What's the kind of meaning that they're assigning? Is it meaning like valuable optimization data which I could use to understand? Which from suggesting that to themselves, they allow themselves to remain in that state of mind that's ideal. And what I've seen sometimes from doing that is the prospect actually saying, you know what, I'm thinking about moving forward with it now. For some reason I had a doubt about this, but I now want to do this. And perhaps it relates to maintaining that inspiration state that I mentioned earlier. And they come to the conclusion by themselves that the product or service actually benefits them. And sometimes I've seen them actually referring someone else or others to do business with me. And in relation to that example earlier, what I noticed was if I allowed the suggestion of they won't accept me, I am not good enough, to be applied to their words. Remember, I'm suggesting to myself, and the suggestion was I'm incomplete, not good enough, they don't accept me. And as we've been discussing, we are complete inside. We have the value to provide. We have the ability to access innovative ideas, creativity, by accepting the reality that we have it all inside. If I, during interaction, suggested to myself in relation to the words that they use, as he says here, mere words in themselves have no suggestive value. The value depends upon the meaning impressed upon them, as in what meaning am I giving to their words. And this is also true for body language, voice tonality, in which I'm suggesting to myself that they won't accept me. What I noticed was by identifying with that, saying I am to that, I then seem to experience the interaction with them from the perspective of lack of completion within. So going back to the premise here, the state of mind, what we're suggesting to ourselves to bring us into the state of mind. Allow our attention to go on the vision. See ourselves as the ideal. I recommend doing this in the morning when you wake up. See yourself as your ideal and operate the day from that premise. I also recommend doing this before going to sleep. See yourself as your ideal and fall asleep to that premise. And you can also do this throughout the day if you'd like, if you find that to be helpful. The key to this is being aware of what you identify with in thinking and feeling. As he says, we associate certain things with certain feelings, and when we see these things, we're apt to experience the feeling indicated. If thoughts, for whatever reason, show up that do not resonate, they appear in your mind for whatever reason, allow them to pass without judgment. This can be done prior to interactions with others and also during interaction with others. We might be suggesting to ourselves from the perspective of disharmony, and we can suggest to ourselves from the perspective of harmony. And also based on my experience, as you continue to do this, it'll become easier. Or more accurately put, you'll find that this flow, bliss, natural way of being is in relationship with others is actually that, a natural way of being. You'll find it easier and effortless to allow the magic of that magnetic state to reflect as the ideal state in others in a mutually beneficial way. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Let's go ahead and conclude this with an autosuggestion to further encourage. You could say, I recognize easier each day my ability to observe what I am identifying with. I identify with ideal relationships and harmony, as this is how it truly is. From this premise, my attention automatically remains lightheartedly on the vision of ideal relationships and ideal interactions with others. Through this authentic way of being, I feel bliss, joy, flow in relationship with others. And from this heightened degree of awareness, I allow the magic to occur and reflect my vision accordingly. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.